The ancients called them the Inuna. Somebody had advanced technology, and somebody was going back and forth, I believe, between Earth, the Moon, and Mars with this blueprint for these incredible stone circles and standing stones and advanced stone technology that we're still trying to figure out today. It's just incredible.
And also what I did for the moon and the Apollo stone circle, that was coined a phrase, the Apollo stone circle, because Apollo 12 landed quite close to it. And what we noticed was, if you project the lay of going through the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, for example, and then you go very down, it goes to Abydos and further on besides to the Nubian pyramids, for example, and you place that on that particular site, it matches up. Silbury Hill, it's the largest man-made mound in northwest Europe, for example. Beneath that grass round mound appearance is a 7-step ziggurat pyramid, is again an archaeological fact.
Gigantic orgone pyramid there underneath that mound, and that whole area there in Avebury, UK, has a striking, coincident, I guess, similarity to a place on Mars called Cydonia. So if you go to the European Space Agency website, right, you get the Cydonia map and you get the Avebury UK ordnance map and download it. You can overlay the two once you scale them, and they match with Silbury Hill and the other anomalies that have been man-made at Avebury. They perfectly align with the 5-sided pyramid and the face on Mars, and another structure they call the city at Cydonia on Mars.
The moon, and it is Mars. And there's been a lot of talk at the moment about Mars and that very square shape that has been discovered and re-looked at, and we're investigating that at the moment.
Boxes, I cannot fit in the boxes. Stop it, quitting was never an option. Exhausted, this passion is never exhausted. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it. Quitting was never an option.
Hi, and welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge TV. I'm Billy Carson. Today's guest is the amazing Maria Wheatley. She's a renowned field researcher, author, and expert in ancient civilizations, specializing in megalithic structures, Earth's energies, and the hidden history of sacred sites. She has a deep understanding of ley lines and also the esoteric knowledge of the ancients. She has spent decades exploring and decoding the mysteries of places like Stonehenge, Avebury, and other prehistoric monuments. As the daughter of the late master dowser, Dennis Wheatley, Maria combines scientific research with ancient wisdom to uncover the lost secrets of our ancestors, making her the leading voice in the study of Earth's ancient past. Welcome to the show, Maria Wheatley. So Maria Wheatley, welcome to the Forbidden Knowledge Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Billy.
Yes, it's been a while since I saw you. I think the last time I saw you in person was in Blackpool in the UK, if I'm correct.
That's right, it was Blackpool and Manchester. I saw you last time in Manchester.
Yes, that was the last time. Manchester, that's right, yeah. Great event. You did a phenomenal job speaking there. And by the way, congratulations on a lot of your recent success. I'm starting to see you pop up everywhere now. I recently saw that you did an interview with Regina Meredith at Gaia. How'd that go?
Oh, that was amazing. She let me speak about the latest research to do with ancient sites. And she's a very good interviewer. So that was amazing.
Yeah, she's one of the best. I mean, she literally does her research and she knows how to draw out of you exactly, what she wants, what she knows that the fans want to hear and that the listeners want to hear. And she also lets you speak. A lot of interviewers, sometimes they don't really let you make the point you're trying to make. And I think that she does a great job letting you speak. Yeah. Absolutely. So today we're going to talk a little bit about several things going on in the UK. And I'd like to hear any new research you have as well. But I want to start off with Stonehenge. I know that Stonehenge is a very enigmatic, incredible place. There's been a lot of incredible historic things that have happened there, a lot of eyewitness accounts of things that have happened there. Do you want to talk a little bit about Stonehenge and the alignments that you know of there, and maybe some of the parts of Stonehenge that people just don't hear about in the mainstream?
Absolutely. I mean, my research has taken me down some corridors to reveal what I call the secret history of Stonehenge, which is the title of my latest book. For instance, Stonehenge is surrounded by what's called long barrows. Long barrows are the very early part of the Stonehenge story, and they contained a very enigmatic, long-lost civilization. And I discovered that these people had long skulls. They had elongated skulls, for example, and their femur bones showed that they were actually quite short. They were not the giants that many other researchers have seen. That's only part of the history. Furthermore, when I was researching at Oxford University, I often study there, the anthropologist reports suggested that their ears were set further back, almost like fey-like, fairy-like in some way. So that was the very first start of Stonehenge, with the long barrows. And in the journey of looking into those long barrows, I think I discovered what many people would have said by Lloyd Pye would be a star child. And Lloyd Pye was very famous. You probably have heard of him, Billy, and the claim of the star child, for instance. Well, I think I found the equivalent in the Stonehenge environs. I gave the antiquarian description because the mound had been covered up, so to speak, to the doctor that worked with Lloyd Pye, and he said, yes, there are similarities, but in this case, there was the whole skeleton, and it had a tail as well, and it was surrounded by long-headed people. This is unprecedented in the English landscape. So that was one of the most unusual burials. And what people don't know about Stonehenge, it went through various phases. So the phase that we're all familiar with, and your audience is familiar with, is called Stonehenge Phase 2. That was a kind of reconstruction of an earlier stone circle. And what I discovered in my research is there was 2 altar stones. That's excited a lot of my male colleagues, but I was the first person in modern history to recognize that. Also, there was another trilithon that was part of Stonehenge that was buried because it didn't fit the order by modern day archaeologists in 1930s. Now, a lot of people, Billy, say, why are a lot of stone circles, such as Stonehenge, aligned to a solar event like the midsummer sunrise, of which Stonehenge is famous? Well, it's not because we all sit around or stand around watching the sunrise above the heel stone in relationship to Stonehenge. What I found in my research is it's a long lost science and technology, and that's because the stones at Stonehenge, especially the 2 altar stones, have piezoelectrical qualities, and the sun at sunrise and sunset contains microwaves. It contains radio waves, and also the long red wave of red light that we see at dawn and sunset. Well, the microwaves can be transduced, that means changed, when it passes through a piezoelectrical material, for instance, and it becomes pressure. Push pressure through an atmosphere like a stone, and it becomes ultrasound. So what's happening at Stonehenge is the light of the sun is creating ultrasound, which I have recorded at several ancient sites, for instance. So there's a lot going on. And today people think it's just a visual event. And ultrasound can be used in healing and various other applications. But what I think is the crux here is that the elongated skulled people who have that exceptionally long skull that I photographed numerous elongated skulled people. I think their hearing perception could be different to ours because their ears are set further back.
That's incredible. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. That maybe they have a different perception of hearing, that the ultrasound resonates differently with them, and maybe they can apply that frequency in different ways that we might not be, maybe we don't have an understanding of it right now, but maybe it applied to even their physiology. Maybe they were able to apply it better to themselves than to our physiology.
Oh, absolutely. And when I've recorded the standing stones themselves, for example, because I'm a second generation master dowser and I've inherited numerous manuscripts from other master dowsers, which sets me apart in the UK. And one thing that I noticed was that in the megalithic layout of ancient sites, standing stones that are rooted into earth energy, and not all are, but the ones that are pushed into that earth energy or a ley line or a grid line, they release sound again. And that's about 18 hertz we've recorded, and that's just below our ability to hear. So I think the megaliths at ancient sites literally absorb the earth energy, and I have actually proved it. They push out that energy at particular points, which again is around that 18 hertz frequency. We hear at 20. So this is not ultrasound, it's infrasound. So I think a lot of the ancients could hear infrasound and ultrasound. And some people that I've taken there have heard the vestiges of this.
That's crazy because, you know, I think elephants use infrasound and they can project their communications over many, many miles using infrasound in the jungle. So they can communicate from vast distances. So when you tell me that, now I'm thinking, who are they communicating with? Could they possibly be using infrasound to communicate with another civilization, village, or another capital somewhere else very far away to have that communication? Because infrasound is amazing for long distance communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what they were doing. I think they were using it as a carrier wave. Okay. And that carrier wave could contain communication for facilities, for example. And that was one way of like being telepathic using this particular sound wave is not beyond the realms of possibility. So that's the kind of science behind Stonehenge as well. And during my research, I realized that the Neolithic probably built it, the elongated skulled people, but much later in the Bronze Age, orthodox dating, I actually think it's a lot older, but we'll keep to the orthodox dating system. The much taller Bronze Age people came, and they were buried in the round barrows that male brick colleagues of mine have studied, but they're much later. And what they did to Stonehenge is quite phenomenal. They started to dismantle it and change it, and even change the entrance to it, is all in the archaeological record. So you had Stonehenge looking a particular way, and then archaeologists have always been baffled. Why did they change Stonehenge? Why did they uproot one of the stone circles and tinker with the design? It's because a different civilization, which were very, very tall, then started to redesign Stonehenge for their own particular identity.
Wow. I see this often, what you're talking about now. Civilizations inheriting something that was already there and then modifying it for their personal use. I think we see this in Egypt, where pharaohs, they stake a claim to pyramids or temples, put their name, put their cartouche inside. Even in the Valley of the Kings, they'll steal somebody else's tomb and put their name on it and say, okay, bury me here when I pass away. And then I think even the culture down in Mexico with Teotihuacan and the Chichen Itza civilization, the Mayans, I was told directly from archaeologists that went to university in Mexico and homegrown, guides, that the Mayans actually inherited what was already there, and they gave the name of the site, for example, to the Teotihuacans. They gave that name, but they themselves didn't really build these sites, and that's what's taught in those universities there. And it seems as if they also may have inherited these sites as well, and then, of course, utilize it for their own purposes, which makes a lot of sense because the Mayans were like supposedly so sophisticated, but then they would rip your heart out of your chest while it was beating and eat it. That's crazy. Throw virgins in the well. So they were barbaric but sophisticated. It kind of never added up to me until I learned that they inherited what was there, just like many cultures have inherited things that were there, just like in Cambodia at Angkor Wat. The king that they say built Angkor Wat, I believe he inherited it. He didn't even live that long, and the shorter period of time that they said it was built, it would be virtually impossible. So I think he inherited what was there, cleaned it up, added some inscriptions to it, and staked a claim to that site. Pretty interesting. Now, when you're looking at the stone, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. What I was just about to say is exactly that's what I think happened at Stonehenge. It's not just one story saying giants built it. It had a previous history that goes back in the archaeological record that we can find. And that's where I came in. I came in and said, okay, I am looking for all of these different artifacts to, piece together the story.
Yeah. Incredible. You've done an incredible job. When you look at the alignment with Stonehenge with the stars, what alignments do we see there?
Right. Well, one alignment that happened during Stonehenge Phase 1, that's even earlier than the Stonehenge that we all are familiar with the giant trilithons, for example. Stonehenge Phase 1 was a ditch and a bank, which we call a henge, which was brilliant white. So imagine that Stonehenge originally was surrounded by a 10-foot wall of chalk. You could not see what was on the inside. For example, in my Dowsing and Earth Energy Legacy, I had the reports of Stonehenge from the 1940s from the custodian that worked there for 25 years. He was very well respected. He was at the dig of the Henge Bank with the Professor Atkinson, who was excavating and restoring Stonehenge with all of those photographs of him using cranes and chains to put up some of the stone settings. But Richard Atkinson told the world, Billy, the Henge Bank was built of just chalk rubble. That was his statement to the world. But what Tom Gorey saw was that, in fact, the Henge Bank, which is a huge bank with a ditch on the inside, was actually carved out almost laser-like of the chalk bedrock. People think those stones are in the earth. They're not. They're in solid chalk. So there was this massive bowl carved out almost laser-like. That's the henge that surrounded Stonehenge, and it had a white floor with 56 blue stones going around. Above that, exactly at midnight on the spring equinox, the star alignment, you asked about star alignments, was to Corona Borealis. That's called the Northern Crown by the ancient Greeks. And to the ancient Celtic people and the Druids of old, for instance, Corona Borealis was the goddess of reincarnation. That would, a bit like in ancient Egypt, you've got the weighing of the feather, haven't you, against the heart to see if you had sinned or you hadn't sinned. It's a kind of a similar thing where you were looked at in your soul, and if you were of a good character, so to speak, you would go to the pagan heaven, which was Corona Borealis, to wait to being reincarnated. So Stonehenge Phase 1 was a reincarnation temple, and I was a guide to Dolores Cannon. She was very famous in America for past life regression, and I often discussed this with Dolores, and she agreed it is a temple of reincarnation dedicated to past lives. Again, is another phase of Stonehenge that people do not talk about, but the shame that happened under the directive of Professor Richard Atkinson is second to none in modern history. For instance, one of the trilithons, for those geeks out there, it's trilithon 51 and 52, if you want to go and look it up. On the outer face of that massive trilithon in the heart of Stonehenge was a hole about 2 feet deep. You could put your whole hand into that stone. And Tom Gorey, our custodian I mentioned of 25 years, respected by every single archaeologist, said this: no matter what the weather was, whether it was sunny, a drought, or windy, that hole would fill up with water miraculously. They didn't know where it came from. They got water diviners in. They got people to test the stone, and they didn't know. But what they did know was that it was miraculous. If you put it on
Mm.
your skin, it would cure eczema, the falling sickness, which is epilepsy. It's an old word for that, and lots of other ailments beside. So there was a healing stone at the heart of Stonehenge. Now, why isn't that visible today? It's because Professor Richard Atkinson filled that hole up with plastic and concrete.
Ah.
So we have lost the healing waters of Stonehenge set above very powerful earth energies. And I've recorded and documented the alluvium deposits. That's when water falls, it makes, its ingrained presence in stone. And I have filmed that and showed that, yes, it's definitely water that was in that stone. It's not speculation, it was fact.
Wow, that is incredible. Did he have a reason why he sealed that hole? Is there any reason? He just did it?
The Ministry of Works was the department of the government that used to, look after Stonehenge. Today, it's looked after by English Heritage and the National Trust, but that didn't exist in that era. It was our government that decreed that should be infilled.
Wow, that is wild. They're always trying to find a way to hide the incredible things from us. Is there any link to Stonehenge and other ancient cultures, like the cultures of Mesopotamia, the Inuna or the Anunnaki, or any other cultures within that area? Do you see any link between those, or it's just seem to be an isolated civilization?
I think in the ancient past that there was really a lot of interaction from a lot of long lost civilizations, and that there was not just one civilization in one part of the world. There were numerous lost civilizations at any one time, and they were interacting. There's direct evidence at Stonehenge with a particular style of crafts that they were interacting with ancient Egypt, for example. In fact, the skulls of the Neolithic that I discovered at Stonehenge are almost, Billy, identical to the long skull of Egypt. Cannot be coincidental. And that is a fact. And if we go to Malta, for example, the skulls are identical. So I see this as a kind of lost race that probably was worldwide, and association with different cultures as well.
Wow, incredible. Yeah, it always seems that these ancient cultures, they had a way of communicating and traveling that we still can't understand today. We see the interaction between so many cultures globally and so many similarities between their construction techniques. I don't know if you knew about this, but in Lake Michigan in America, they discovered a henge.
Yeah.
And on some of the stones, one of the stones is a mastodon etched into the stone. And there's other animals as well, but it's just mind-blowing that halfway around the world, in the middle of this lake in America, there's another henge. Somebody taught this standing stone technique. I don't know if it could be just a coincidence, but there's so many standing stones around. It just seems like somebody may have been teaching this technique. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've heard of, Lake Michigan, and even if you use LiDAR, I'm qualified in interpreting LiDAR. It can go through trees, it can go through sand, and it can show you what went before, so to speak. And if you fly that over the Amazon and you look there, again, you have in Peru henges that have now tree cover all over them. So yes, this was a long lost technology. And what one of my discoveries about standing stones was, and this goes back about 10 or so years, that particular points on a standing stone, there are 5 above ground, 2 below, which I've always equated to the chakras. Well, one of those high energy bands, it's like a point that releases energy. That's the easiest way to see it. Well, that sends a signal, which we recorded, to the next stone circle, which sends a signal to the next stone circle. And we have proved this. And that is, and I always call it this, it's Neolithic Wi-Fi. There's no wires there's energy being traveled over. And again, I think that was used as much as a carrier wave as anything else. So stone circles across the British Isles, and 1,000 survive throughout the British Isles today. There would have been thousands and thousands of them. Many have been lost in recent times. They are all connected in this Wi-Fi network. And that's, again, long lost technology. And I think if that was occurring in the British Isles, it was occurring with the obelisks in ancient Egypt, in monuments in Mexico, for example. And that's quite factual because we got the frequency. But more than that, I think that the ancients could encode.
Watch this video for free at www.4bk.tv or download the app on your smartphone, Fire Stick app, Samsung TV, Roku, and other app providers.